the issues of the conflict. And one side has its position, and the other side has its position. And until we will be able to find an inclusive narrative that brings both people to walk out of the room with dignity, it ain't going to end. But only then it can work. So some of the things, what I'm trying to say, the bottom line is that some of the things you raised, I'm not going to go into it because this is not an evening about my politics. Yeah, it's about breaking the silence in a sense. Yeah, some of these things should be discussed and need to be negotiated, and there are positions for here and for there. There is one thing that we shouldn't confuse: that the occupation can be negotiated. That should have ended, as I said earlier, 47 years ago.
Thank you, Yehuda. Thank you. Thank you. Oui? Ah oui. Jean? Oui. Vas-y, Marianne. Tu te lèves et tu parles pour tout le monde.
Okay. I will say it in French because it's better for me. Alors, si j'ai bien compris, tout à l'heure, vous disiez que, disons, l'occupation militaire de la Cisjordanie, Gaza, c'est terminé, mais... terminé. 2005, des engagements, mais en Cisjordanie, donc l'occupation, la tactique de l'armée est de vraiment faire sentir qu'elle est toujours présente et qu'elle peut intervenir à n'importe quel moment, donc c'est quelque part terroriser la population civile. On est d'accord que tout ça, ça ne fait pas sens ni sur le plan politique, spirituel, intellectuel, tout philosophique, tout ce qu'on veut, mais je ne comprends pas tellement bien la logique. D'un côté, on augmente toujours les colonies, donc il y a plus de 500 000 colons en Cisjordanie. De l'autre côté, ce que vous dites semble dire que quelque part, ceux qui sont au pouvoir actuellement, ils ont un problème psychologique, donc ils croient que c'est les Palestiniens qui les menacent, et donc il faut répondre à cette menace, donc, mais que c'est un phénomène psychologique plutôt. Je ne comprends pas très bien le sens de ce que vous êtes... je ne comprends pas je sais bien qu'il n'y a pas de logique. Je ne comprends pas où veulent en arriver les politiciens israéliens. Ils n'arriveront pas à faire fuir les Palestiniens. Vous dites eux-mêmes qu'ils vont résister. En même temps, on met un argent incroyable, une énergie incroyable dans l'occupation. Quelle est la logique ? Voilà. De simplement terroriser une population. Je ne comprends pas quel est le sens... en termes de solution ou en termes... si c'est un problème psychologique, d'accord, ok, ça je peux encore comprendre, mais sinon en termes de stratégie, je ne comprends vraiment pas du tout.
I grasp a few things. One of the things you said kind of like made me angry, which is this, the settlers control politics, whatever. No. The story would have been very easy if it was the settlers who are leading the political regime. The settlement project is a Labour Party enterprise before the settlement movement started. If you ask me how I understand Israeli politics, I would probably divide Israeli political spectrum to 4 camps. On the right, the religious right, till middle left of the Likud, what I would call an annexation camp. This is a camp that wants the land. Now, some of them are calling at the end of the day, what they want is this form of apartheid, or that form of apartheid, or this form of apartheid. From the middle of the Likud till the left edges of Labour is what I would call the control camp. Control camp, that's the book. These are people who cannot grasp a true, sovereign, independent Palestinian state besides the state of Israel and our side of the Jordan River. And then there is the anti-occupation camp, from the left of labor to the left. These are people, this is a political camp that wishes, wants, and at worst will accept a true sovereign Palestinian state. You know, the government of Israel, I'll get soon to the fourth camp. But the Israeli government, many times, one of the things you hear is we need to manage the conflict. Yeah? I don't know if you heard this phrase before. I'm all in favor of managing the conflict. And again, I relate a bit to your question. I'm not sure we can solve today the conflict. Yeah? But the problem is that what my government wants is not to manage the conflict. They want to manage the occupation, if I go back to my distinction. So if you ask me what the strategy is just more of the same. It's been going on for 47 years. It can go on for another 47 years. Why not? That's the mindset. And the fourth camp is Lieberman, our foreign minister. At least the way I read his politics, I don't believe he cares about how many states there will be. And I don't believe he wants the land. For him, it can be 4 states, it can be 7 states, it can be 2 states. He doesn't care. What matters to him is that the state of Israel will be clean. A pure state. That's a new idea of what kind of Israel you want to have. You brought in the settlers. The settlers are a bit of the 4th chapter of the book. The 3 chapters of the book don't mention the settlers. The 4th chapter starts to bring in the settlers. What? Yeah. It's called law enforcement, and the title is The Dual Regime. It's basically trying to tell a story of a system of where the annexation meets the control in their relationship and what it means. And in this chapter, there is 2 things we try to highlight. And one is literally the dual regime, meaning the fact that settlers and Palestinians in the same territory are under different legal systems, settlers under civilian rule and law, Palestinians under military rule and law, enforced by 2 different executive branches. So even though by international law, as the occupying power, we must protect the people who live there, our orders on the field as soldiers are, if we see a settler attacking a Palestinian, not our job. We are there to protect the settlers. But this is the first thing and very basic one. The second one we try to argue is something, I would say, a bit more deep, and something, to say the truth, that I didn't see so clearly until we started working on this book. And that is about the role that settlers and settlements play in all this big picture. Many people think, when they think about the occupation, life could have been so much better for the military if the settlements were just not there. Your job is to rule these Palestinians. That's your job. That's what you're going to do. But why do you need all these civilians to start to walk in between your legs and make a mess? The thing is, if you listen to the occupation of today, you understand that the settlements today, the system has turned them to an advantage. They're just another arm of control over Palestinians. And I don't only mean in the basic sense of land and fragmentation and marginalization of the Palestinian footprint. I'm talking about things that are 100% military security issues. I'll give you an example. If I'm a soldier during basic training, I'm sent to guard a settlement for a week or 2. Who do you think gives me my rules of engagement and my briefings? Is it my direct officer? The answer is no. You know who does it? The settler security officer. Each settlement has a local settler who is a settler security officer, financed by the Ministry of Defense, but hired by the settlement. And he gives me the orders. And he tells me where Palestinian shepherds are allowed to go and where not. And he tells me who's allowed to come in and who's not. The West Bank is divided to, if I'm not mistaken, 7 regional brigades. Once a week, at the headquarters of the brigade, there is an intelligence assessment briefing. Around the table, who sits? The brigadier general, his deputy, the operational officer, the Secret Service representative, the commanders of the battalions in the area, and who else? You got it right. Settler security officers of the local settlements. The police uses the radios, the Israeli police uses in the West Bank is Motorola. The military has its own radio. Who has both? You got it right, the control rooms of the settlers. Do I need to continue? Because I can continue.
Is it a matter of strategy or is it just mental health issue? To put it just...
No, it's not a mental health. I wish it was a mental health. We could go to therapy. It's a matter of strategy. And that's why what we need to do is to change the cost-benefit calculation. Otherwise, it ain't going to end. It's what?
To reach what?
I agree with you. That's why I'm here. But sadly enough, the people who call the shots disagree with us. They actually believe that this can work. That the Palestinian people is something new, yeah? That as opposed to any other people in the history of mankind, they will agree forever to live under our fist. Yeah? You know, their heads, there is a room for a boot, and they will agree to live like this. I agree it ain't going to work. Yeah? But, again, otherwise I cannot understand. What you would say? You would say, but the international community is not going to let it. 47 years they're doing it. Nothing happens. You know, Naftali Bennett, our Minister of Economy, ran a campaign in the last elections. For the first time, there was a party, 13 seats today they have, I think, which is more than 10% of the parliament. They ran on a platform of annexation. Annexing Area C, 60% of the West Bank. Building bridges and tunnels between the different Palestinian islands, and that's how no one would say that it's apartheid. That was his campaign. Look, he made a clip in our days of social media, right? That's what goes. And the clip laid down the plan. And you know what was how the clip ended? And what would the international community say? And then there's an iPhone, and there's an incoming call, and you know which logo you have? The UN logo. And what Naftali Bennett does, presses the red button, the end button, doesn't even take the call. They won't recognize the annexation, so what? They don't recognize the annexation of the Golan Heights. They don't recognize the annexation of East Jerusalem, so they won't recognize this. So I hope that answers your question.
Oui, Youssef.
Every Palestinian child knows what is the occupation. How it comes that the Palestinian Authority, Europe, United States, still believe in Israeli lies.
Look, this is the question.
Peux-tu répéter la question en français?
Ah,
Tous les enfants palestiniens savent ce que c'est que l'occupation.
I think this is an interesting question where you can either take the long road to answer, which I usually did up to now, or you can take the short way, and I'll take the short way this time. I think this is a question you should ask the world and the EU and your government and not me. You know, there's an expression in Hebrew, we say, יותר משהפרה רוצה להניק, יותר משהעגל רוצה לינוק, הפרה רוצה להניק. If I'll translate it to English, I hope I'm doing the right. עגל זה כף, נכון? It is more than the calf who wants to drink the milk, the cow wants to feed it. So I think that's the answer to your question.
No, it was not okay.
No? What I said is that it is, in other words, it is more than Israel wants the world to believe it, the world wants to believe Israel. Yeah, the analogy that I tried to say.
Oui, il y avait une
The
question par là.
Israeli government, yeah? Supporting Israel.
Oui, pour dire.
Je pense que je n'ai pas besoin de micro.
Non, mais c'est pour. C'est pas pour. Lève-toi.
Pardon.
Lève-toi. C'est parce qu'on Chut, c'est parce qu'on enregistre.
D'accord. Alors, moi j'ai lu votre livre avec beaucoup d'intérêt. J'ai été, je dois le dire, choquée au départ, au long des dizaines de pages que je parcourais, des centaines de pages. Alors je voudrais quand même relever des choses qui ont été dites donc par des Israéliens qui sont intervenus sur le terrain. Donc il s'agissait de punir, décourager, intimider, opprimer, marquer notre présence. Marquer notre présence, c'était dans le livre comme un refrain. Taper, frapper, pousser, tirer en l'air, faire du mal à la famille et repartir, mener une guerre de l'information, faire de la vie des Palestiniens un cauchemar, effrayer les habitants, exercer une pression personnelle, gifler, taper les gens, leur tirer dans la jambe, leur compliquer la vie, les retarder. Notre mission était de perturber la vie des gens et les harceler. Ce sont les mots exacts qu'on m'a dit. J'ai vraiment pensé naïvement, et j'en parlais avec ma présidente Claude Abou-Samra, qu'après l'édition, la sortie de ce livre, il y aurait un éveil des consciences, une prise de conscience au niveau international et de chaque individu. Il y a eu tout récemment, juillet et août, avec Gaza, encore une fois, Gaza, toujours et encore. Alors, il serait intéressant pour moi d'avoir l'avis de quelqu'un comme vous. À quel moment, à votre avis, jusqu'où Israël devra aller dans l'escalade de l'inacceptable pour que enfin on assiste à une réaction de la communauté internationale? Merci.
I really don't have the answer. In my eyes, as I said earlier, we crossed the red line 47 years ago. I believe, and in a way, this is why I'm here. I'm just trying to think of the right way to put it, and to say this. As I said earlier, I see the work of breaking the silence as a way of taking responsibility. But I don't believe that responsibility starts and ends with being a veteran who speaks out. I believe that responsibility starts and ends with being a human being that needs to mark the red lines. And that's why I'm here. I think there is different circles of responsibility, and definitely as someone who has done it, I'm at the center. And my society comes around. And that's why most of the work of breaking the silence, 90+% of it is done in Israel. But there is another circle, and that is every human being on the globe. And I think you also have responsibility. And I hope that you will take it. And I hope that you will take it in the right way. Yeah? Within the framework that I believe it should be taken. And I remind you the equation. Israel versus occupation. Yeah? One thing I think we need to embrace, which is Israel, and one thing we need to viciously attack, which is occupation. And I try not to be apologetic on either one of them. Because I think that's the only place, the only position where I feel that I'm truthful to my own values.
Tu peux avancer.
Ah, faut se mettre devant le milieu. Oui, je parle pour tout le monde. J'ai une question au départ de l'organisation. Je voudrais savoir comment les soldats viennent à témoigner. Et une autre question, aujourd'hui, il y a de plus en plus un pourcentage de plus en plus d'ultra-orthodoxes dans l'armée. Et je crois qu'en 2017, les ultra-orthodoxes seront enrôlés obligatoirement dans l'armée. Donc, comment les soldats, de plus en plus, comment ils vont pouvoir encore prendre la parole? Est-ce que la pression à l'intérieur de l'armée comme de la société ne sera pas si forte qu'ils devront se taire?
And for the first question, how do people come to testify, right? That's the, I understood right. Most people, we get to them. When people approach us, right away the red light is on. Who they are, what's the motives. Yeah, combat soldiers usually don't speak. Not only in the story of the IDF. Yeah, it's something that... So the main way we work is a friend brings a friend. We sit down with you, have a conversation, record the interview. The last question is always, open your phone, give me names. And everybody has two friends from high school, one from sergeant training, one from basic training, two guys from campus, and one from work. And you'll give me 10 names, and I'll call them, and 3 of them will speak, and they'll give me 5 names each. And so when I call you, I know who you are and why I should trust you, and what's your motives. Because one of the things that can be very dangerous for us is that we publish a story that is not true, and then we lose our credibility. And until today, 10 plus years, not one story we published was proven wrong. Not one story. Because when you approach us, we're very, very careful. You're trying to set a score with your officer? Are you trying to feed us with a story that is not true? Are you, yeah? Very cautious. There is also, we also have, for example, the IDF has 3 times a year a recruitment cycle. March, August, and November. So 3 times a year, people finish their service, right? So you have sometimes these conferences for about to be discharged soldiers, yeah? Kind of like an intro to civilian life. So we will have our activists recruiting people outside there, or, yeah? So there's other things that we do from time to time. In terms of the ultra-Orthodox, you're saying, if I please may be allowed to correct you a bit. I think you need to distinguish between, I hope I understood right, between the ultra-Orthodox and the national religious. Are you talking, you brought it up kind of like in the issue of the Orthodox people taking over the army, you mean? That was the question? So because that is something we hear more and more these days, but that's not the ultra-Orthodox, that's the national religious. It's 2 different groups. The ultra-Orthodox are supposed to serve in 2017, read my lips, if there is one thing that I allow myself to be a prophet, is that they're not going to serve in 2017. Everything else in the Middle East, I try not to be a prophet. But this is something I allow myself. It ain't going to happen, don't worry. About the national religious people in the army, that is a different story. Yeah, there is, I think it's also part of a greater shift of elites, you would call it, in Israeli society, where you see more and more national religious people. You can see them on the bench of the Supreme Court, in the state bureaucracy, and in the military, especially in the low-ranking officers and combat units. Extreme percentage of people who graduate officer cadets and infantry. I think, if I'm not mistaken, now is like 40% are national religious, if not even more already by now. And some people are kind of like afraid. And I must tell you that the way I see it, I don't like these positions. You know, I'm a religious person also. And I don't like people who are afraid of religious people. I think this is part of this trend of talking about these things is part of trying to whitewash, the old elites from its responsibility to what Israel has done. It's almost like what we do a lot in the Israeli center, political center, is we try to blame the settlers, as if it's not the state responsible for 47 years of occupation. But it's this radical settlers. No. And I don't believe fundamentally things will change if it's going to be national religious people who are standing in a checkpoint or other soldiers. The problem is the checkpoint, not who stands there. Yeah, so I don't really... it is scary if it continues this way and they climb up the chain of command. And 15 years down the road, all the general staff are people who think the same. That's when it becomes a bit scary. Because then you need to start to wonder which prime minister will go against an opinion that is shared by everyone around the table. But as for today, around that table, there is different opinions. I hope I made sense. I don't know.
I will ask you one question, because you are here also to meet politicians tomorrow. If I am not indiscreet, pardon. Si je ne suis pas indiscret, quel genre de choses pensez-vous devoir leur demander demain? Parce que c'est important pour nous de soutenir votre action. C'est important pour nous de soutenir votre action auprès des instances politiques. Donc, quelles seraient vos principales demandes par rapport aux autorités politiques du Luxembourg, aux partis, aux ministres que vous rencontrerez?
I will try to make my best to make my argument a bit shorter about the permanent nature of the occupation. Because sadly enough, we're not going to have this amount of time. And I'm going to try to tell them what I try to tell everyone, which is, I see the occupation as an offensive campaign of erasing the Green Line and maintaining a one-state reality. And because I believe the existence of Israel and of Palestine is dependent on redrawing the Green Line, so I'm going to ask them to do what they can to put brakes to this offensive campaign. I think that's our challenge, is to do what we can to stop this.
Ok. Il y avait encore Pierrick et puis monsieur, une dernière question après.
Concernant aujourd'hui, il y a Breaking the Silence. Il y a quelque temps, il y avait des anciens dirigeants du Shin Bet qui, dans un film, ont dénoncé aussi ce qui se passait en Israël, enfin dans les territoires occupés. Il y a eu les manifestations sociales il y a 3 ans en Israël qui justement demandaient moins de budget dans le militaire. Il y avait toutes ces personnes qui ont manifesté contre la guerre à Gaza. Bien que bien que toutes les puissances soutiennent Israël et qu'il n'y a aucune sanction qui soit prise, pensez-vous que justement c'est à l'intérieur, c'est en Israël que les consciences vont s'éveiller, c'est eux qui pourront faire changer la société et pas en dehors de toutes ces sanctions qui auraient pu être prises justement contre Israël, quoi. Ben justement, est-ce que c'est à l'intérieur même, est-ce que justement c'est la société israélienne qui va pouvoir s'élever et non, est-ce qu'il faut justement attendre que ça soit la société israélienne qui s'élève contre ses dirigeants, alors que nous, Européens, c'est plutôt l'inverse qu'on attend, quoi. C'est plutôt nous, on pense que c'est plutôt les puissances extérieures qui vont faire en sorte que ça change.
I believe that this is a very serious political issue, and change needs to come from all over. I think there are 3 forces. There's the international community, there's Palestinians, and there's Israelis, and each of us has a role to play. And if we all show up to the game, only then we win. Yeah? And that's why I think the responsibility is on everyone. Again, as an Israeli, most of our work is inside Israel. First and foremost because that's our country, that's our home, that's where we live. But also because our role, the way we understand it, is to work mainly there. But I think everybody needs to show up.